Welcome back to Made for More. I am your host, Holly J. Moore. I am a divorce lawyer on a mission to help you use your adversity and difficult times in your life to grow and show up as the best version of yourself. I am here with Aaron Bender, who is always the best version of himself.
Yes, I'm very masculine. I'm very trying to get in touch with my feminine side as well.
We
are
get
back.
to talk about my favorite thing today.
Which, honestly, prior to doing the podcast with you, by the way, I think we're 30 plus episodes in.
Whew.
Yeah.
And we did 25 of them today.
Yes. And we still have more to go.
Yeah, we do.
I don't know that I ever really thought about masculine and feminine energies and roles and things like that. And like you said, it's your favorite topic.
It is my favorite topic. I find it so fascinating. One, because I think it's just interesting. And two, because we have foobarred it so bad. Yeah. So I'm like, how can we get this thing back on track? You know, because I deal in relationships breaking up every day. And so I'm always like, why is this happening? Why are we here? Why am I doing this client's third divorce?
No.
Yes.
No. Have you had like multiple divorce clients, 3, 4, 5?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. I mean, I think the first time I had like I'm now doing the second divorce was maybe 5 years ago, because it's like now I've been doing it long enough.
Right.
And I've done the custody battle of the child that I originally fought custody for. Like,
wow.
Yes.
Have you done the divorce for a child of a previously divorced client? Or am I saying that right? Wow.
I started a divorce and then they reconciled.
Oh, wow.
But I mean, it's coming for sure. Like, yeah. So I'm like, let's talk about relationships. Let's go to the root cause of this. I can divorce you guys all day long. I can divorce your kids and your kids' kids, but like, let's talk a little bit more about why is this happening? We are joined today by Ken Blackman, a coach, speaker, author, and someone who says his life's work is to guide couples through intimate human connection using truth, transparency, and compassion. Ken, welcome to the show.
So glad to be here. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Yes, same. It's going to be a great one. So tell me, first of all, why have you made this your life's work?
Yeah. So I was a software engineer, and
Wow.
I do this work because I needed this work myself. I didn't have great relationships. I was terrible. I was codependent. I was misogynistic. I didn't know how to relate with women at all. I was shy. So I needed to actually learn how to have good relationships. And once I started to learn what it takes to have great relationships, it was so transformative for me. I was like, this is the work I want to do with other people. And so I left my career and just started learning how to do this. And I've been doing it for 25 years now, full time, and never look back. It's the most rewarding work I've ever done.
I guess I'm kind of on the other end of the spectrum of this work as a divorce lawyer, but because of that, I know that the work you do is insanely important. The romantic relationships we have in our life are probably one of the most critical things that, determines our happiness, our success, so many things. So what is the secret sauce to a good relationship?
I will say this. So I often get couples who come to me and they've got all their problems, and they've got their list of things that they think are gonna convince me that they're not meant to be together, and so they'll list all the issues that they have, and I'll listen and I'll nod, and they'll say, there's no hope for us, right? And I'll say, no, I want to hear what is good and what's working in the relationship, or what had you guys come together. There's got to be something good here, or else you wouldn't be here trying to salvage it. Right. And so for me, because I'm in the work of problem solving, and helping them resolve their problems, that's not the issue. The issue is always going to be whether the good in the relationship is good enough to make it worth it. And so I always start with, tell me what's good in the relationship, because it's going to be on that basis that we start to build and actually have enough skin in the game to actually solve some of these problems. And so that to me is the deciding factor. If the good is good enough for them to want to put in the work to actually make something great from it.
Right. Absolutely. So then, okay, so let's say you're working with a couple and everybody determines collectively, yes, there is definitely some good here. This relationship is salvageable, worth saving.
Yeah.
Then what? What do we do from there?
Well, I do a lot of asking questions and listening before I can say anything. And so
Yeah.
I'll just talk to I'll talk to them kind of one at a time. I mean, they'll both be in the room, right? Or on the Zoom call. But I'll be just ask questions and listen and until I feel like I can see the world through their eyes. Like, okay, I get it. I can see you as a sane, intelligent, mature adult. And then I talk to the other person and I talk to them until I see the world through their eyes. Then I do some amount of translating, like here's what this person is saying, here's what this person is saying. Then we get into what the issues are. And that's, it's very personalized work, so it'll depend on what comes up in that process. But I remind them, if they've forgotten, what it's like to see the other person as a sane, intelligent, mature adult. And sometimes a lot of my translating is just that. Like, this is, if you had high regard for this person and you respected them, here's what you're trying to say would sound like talking to them.
Yeah. So I know that one of the things that you sort of subscribe to, or one of the things that you say, is traditional masculine feminine roles are failing in modern relationships. Can you expand on that?
Yeah. So, I used to teach a lot of stuff around masculine, feminine. Basically, what the modern word for these days is polarity. And I think what people are actually looking for is, I now use the word complementarity, meaning, you need some similarity. You need to be similar in some ways, because if you're different in every conceivable way, then you're just not going to agree about anything.
Right.
But you also need some differences. You need, like, if you're trying to vie for the same position, or you're trying to do the same thing, like, when I'm in this state, I need you to be in some other state in order to meet me. And so if I'm in this state and you're in this state at the same time, you're not going to be able to meet me. So we need some differences. We need to complement each other. So that's really the thing that people are shooting for. The problem with the old masculine feminine model is that to be honest, it wasn't very good for women. And that's why, like, so many women have worked so hard to have access to some of the roles that traditionally have been reserved for men.
Okay.
But you don't see a lot of men who are striving or having any interest in the roles that were traditionally reserved for women. There's that difference. Why is there that difference? Because in so many ways, the roles that were assigned to women weren't that great. And so,
when you talk about roles, are you talking about like roles inside of a relationship, or are you talking about like, jobs, careers? What do you mean by roles?
I mean both.
Okay.
So, if let's say the traditional like role of a woman being a housemaker, taking care of the kids, like the traditional, like, there was a show in the 1960s or 50s called Father Knows Best. That was literally the name of it, is Father Knows Best.
Yes.
So I'll try and describe it. He's rational, he's production oriented, he's the breadwinner. He's the undisputed head of the household. He's the final decision maker, right? And then she takes care of the kids. She's nurturing. She's the kind of the emotional core of the relationship, right? Like, so she's in charge of the emotional well-being of everyone in the relationship. Right. So if he's the material provider, she's the emotional provider. So why you know, during the last century or the last, 100 years, 50 years, why have so many women been wanting some alternative to that, right? Why are so many women wanting something other than that? And from my point of view, if that role had the status, had the freedom, had the income, had the just the power, the decision-making power of a man's role, men would be flocking to that position. And they're, like, why haven't we made women's roles so fun, so like where all the power and the status is? Why haven't we made women's roles so attractive and so compelling that men would want to be doing that role? And when we make, if we're able to do that, then the roles will feel more balanced. But the reason.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah.
What I was going to ask is, when I think about masculine and feminine polarity, I really think about the energetics of it. And I don't necessarily think, I as a woman have to be a housewife or a nurse or something like that, and my husband has to be, whatever, a lawyer, a fireman, a manly job.
Right.
I think about it more in terms of like the energy of the dynamics of the relationship. And don't you think that there is something inherent about the genders where I am a woman and I actually happen to be a lawyer, which maybe is a masculine job, but at my core, I was created to be a more emotional being. And, my husband is a man and he's created to be a more logical being. I mean, don't you think there is something, inherent about the DNA of the genders that lend itself to those energetic roles?
I think you're actually a perfect example, because you have some qualities that would be called feminine. You have some qualities that would be called masculine. And you want to be met in the way, like in the ways that you show up feminine. You want a partner to be able to show up with you in his masculine.
Yes.
In the ways that you're masculine, you might want your partner to have some of those qualities that we normally refer to as feminine. Like you might want someone who has emotional skills that men don't normally have.
Right.
So you're a perfect example of what I'm talking about, because I think these roles, at best, they're descriptive, not prescriptive.
Okay.
So there is something similar in my relationship where there are some things that we do where definitely I have the traditional man's role, and she has a traditional women's role. There's places where we're kind of the opposite of that.
Okay.
And there's places where that doesn't matter. And so I think just looking at you and what you've told me about your relationship, if you had to be a woman in all the ways, do you know what I mean? Like there's going to be another woman who doesn't have a masculine job. She's feminine in other ways, right? So I think if it's descriptive and it's a way of understanding how the relationship works, it's great. If it's you need to be this because of your gender, and you need to be this, that's where it has problems. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Okay.
Yeah.
So what is the approach that we should be taking that might, be better suited for a healthy relationship?
What you needed, and it sounds like you found it, is someone who can meet you with you being who you are in all the ways that you are. So like you said, there's some ways that you're feminine, there's some ways that you're masculine, and you need someone who matches you and can meet you and be a good match for who you are. And so a lot of times what I'll do is, I won't even use the words masculine, feminine. What I'll do is I'll think to myself, if I were to say masculine or feminine here, what are the qualities that I'm actually talking about right now? What am I trying to say with those words? It'll be like, does someone in the relationship need to be more assertive? Does someone in the relationship need more emotional intelligence? Does someone in the relationship need to balance their emotions with some rational, like, logical thinking? Does someone in the relationship, need to be able to take a stand? Does someone in the relationship need to be nurturing and, like, whatever I just start talking about the actual qualities, the actual skills themselves,
right?
Rather than putting them in the buckets.
Got it.
Does that make sense?
100%. Yes.
Okay.
Well, because I think, do you agree that we all have masculine and feminine qualities within us?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And then it's just really sort of the dance of, which person is sort of exhibiting this quality at that moment. And then the polarity of the other person, kind of creating that polarity, I guess.
Yeah. What I found for me in my practice was when I started using less masculine, feminine languaging and more the actual skills, the actual qualities, the actual ways of being, and talking about those directly.
Okay.
It just made more sense to people and allowed people to be how they actually are and kind of meet each other without it being a gendered thing or a supposed to thing or like an obligation or some way they're supposed to be.
Right. Okay. So what problems or issues do you find are most common amongst couples?
I mean, that's hard to answer. It's all over the board. It's all over the board. A lot of times it's kind of related to what we're talking about, actually. A lot of times people come to me and their things aren't working, and it's not because there's something wrong with him. It's not because there's something wrong with her. It's because the relationship template that they're trying to fit themselves into isn't working. And so often what I end up doing is having them create a way of relating with each other where they're actually more authentic with each other than what they were trying to do. They're trying to squeeze themselves into some template. And I'm like, no, you're great. You're fine the way you are. You're fine the way you are. You need to throw out the relationship template and start relating based on who you actually are. Let's craft the relationship based on you guys. And when that happens, all of a sudden they're more authentic. They feel more themselves. And they're actually getting along better. So often it's their ideas about what relationships are supposed to look like that's in the way.
As a divorce lawyer, I see, and I've been doing this for almost 20 years, so I've seen a lot of marriages be dissolved, and I've talked to thousands and thousands of people. And at my law firm, we happen to represent more males than females. And so I've talked to a lot of divorcing males over the years. And of course, the intimacy aspect of the relationship is often problematic. So I've been shouting from the rooftops for probably 10 years now to women, guys not as in, males, but like people, women, like men really are having this complaint very often that something is missing in the physical intimacy aspect of the relationship, whether it's frequency or quality. It runs the gamut. But of course, I'm no expert. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a sex therapist. I'm not an expert. So you being an expert, how important is intimacy, the physical aspect of the relationship? How important is that in a marriage?
I think it's super important. I think it's super important. But with the situation that you're describing, keep in mind, it's like, I think I said this before, but women are conditioned to think of their sex as being for the other person.
Yes.
So it is much harder for them to be the voice of saying, like, when I'm working with a couple, I'm finding out, oh, here's the ways that she's been disappointed, but hasn't had, like, he can be vocal about, hey, it's been a while, and it seems like we only do this occasionally, and it seems like when we do it, it's just charity. he's able to be a stand for his pleasure, but then he might be turning her pleasure into something that's again a performance for him, right? Like,
yes,
you're letting me down by not having a good time in the bedroom, rather than turning everything around, figuring out what would make the thing as pleasurable for her as it is for him. And actually, because women have been trained not to. I'll give you an example of this. So when I train a couple on how he can pleasure her, so they're going to spend an evening. He's going to put all of his attention on finding out what's pleasurable to her, right? The whole evening. All she has to do is relax, lay back, give him some instructions like, hey, could you slow down a little bit? Hey, could you go, like give him some instructions. But other than that, her job is to enjoy it. That is her job, okay? So that's the situation. When they're done, he's not going to expect anything. He's not going to, So imagine that's the situation, right? You would be amazed at how difficult that is for her.
Right.
Because she's lying there. She's thinking, am I moaning right? Am I moving right? Am I doing, is what I'm doing pleasurable for him? That's how deeply conditioned women are against having it be about her pleasure. Right. And so he has been given permission by society to say, this is important. Her options are, she may not feel like she can do that. She may not say, I want you to pay more attention to my body. Right. And so how it manifests is, I'm just not interested. It's like, it's not a big, I just don't like it that much. Maybe I'm asexual, or something. Maybe I'm just not into it. Of course, then they get divorced. She's with someone who's more attentive, and all of a sudden she loves it. Right?
And it's game on.
And it's game on.
Yeah.
And so we have to dismantle all of that conditioning. Yes. So he's got more attention on her than he has been. Right. She's willing to actually tell him, even if she has to tell him a third time or a fourth time or a fifth time or a sixth time or a seventh time, could you slow down a little bit? Could you slow down a little bit more? Could you there's the basics of giving her the permission and the courage to tell him the truth, and him slowing down enough to be attentive, even during the sex act, where he's most likely to turn his attention to himself. Right. So I have this rule. I'm going to get a little crass here, but I have this rule for a couple. And when we're doing this work, I say to her, no, if it doesn't feel good to you, you stop. I don't care if he's 10 strokes away from going over the edge. If it doesn't feel good to you, you stop. That's how serious I am about it. We are only going to do things that feel good to your body. And once your body learns, oh, this is something that feels good, it's actually pleasurable, I promise you, you're going to want more of it. Just naturally, at a brainstem level, your body's going to want it. Right.
Yeah. So ultimately, maybe if you're working with a couple and this is sort of a problem area, maybe this seems like work, but ultimately, explain to the people, if you do this work and you go down this journey, what are the benefits?
Yeah. So I'm so glad you're asking this question, because this is a conversation that I have where I have to, I often say to the guy, I don't think you're aware, and really, how could you be, at how mediocre the sex that you're trying to get her to have, how mediocre that sex is, and how much better it is, how much better the sex could be. Right. And I'm telling you, and the other thing I say to him is, I'm telling you, if you put in the time and the attention to pleasure her so that she's actually experiencing that much pleasure for real, it's going to be so much fun for you that I promise you, you're going to suddenly be very dedicated to her pleasure, because all of a sudden, when she's really enjoying it, remember the thing I talked about earlier, men want empathetic connection, and they want the empathetic co-experiencing of the sexual pleasure.
Right.
So once he starts to put his attention on her pleasure, separate from his own physical pleasure, right? Maybe his body or his genitals are involved, but if that takes his attention off of her, like to not ever take his attention off of her pleasure, what he'll find is that as she's getting pleasured and he's literally in connection with her while he's doing it, he's getting a nutrient that he didn't realize he was hungry for. Oh no, this is the thing that is pleasurable to me, in addition to whatever I'm feeling in my body, right? Like, this is the thing. And all of a sudden he becomes very dedicated.
Right.
And then the thing I have to say to her is, keep in mind, when you're a stand for your pleasure, you're actually a stand for the sex getting better for both of you, right? Like,
and wouldn't you say not just the sex, but the whole relationship?
Exactly. Oh yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But as much as it is that you know, as a divorce lawyer, you hear guys saying, I wasn't getting, you know, this part of our relationship dropped off, and I tried to hang with it, and I just couldn't. Like, it's like, I think this is a necessary, and he's right, it's a necessary thing. As much as that's true, it's also true that men can be attentive until the sex act, and then he takes his attention off of her, and he isn't aware, or he wants her to put on a show of being pleasured because that is pleasuring him, rather than finding out what her body likes and doing that.
Yes, and to be fair, I am only now, you know, my sort of position of like shouting this to the rooftops and like telling fellow women, like, you know, get with the program. I mean, that was probably informed by my own experience, which, you know, maybe is not the experience of these other women where this is an issue. And I am now learning, and my learning actually really truly started on my very first podcast episode I did with a female embodiment coach, where it was really the first time in my mind I was like, oh, maybe it's not the woman, it's not 100% the woman's fault that they're disinterested in this. And through, you know, and so I'm learning that. And it, you know, I should have known better. It always takes two to tango, you know, and hardly ever is anything just one person's fault versus the other. But I think, you know, you've touched on it multiple times. I think it's also part of our conditioning in society, where it's like, for women, it's like, okay, this is a performative act. Okay, check that box. We served our husband in that way, you know, and men really aren't paying attention to what women really need or want. And so it's really this whole cluster F, which is why, you know, the work that you do is so valuable, because just from the work that I do, I've seen how important and how integral the intimacy is to the relationship as a whole, and to the relationship being able to survive. I've got just a little bit more to say. And I know I've said this before, but it bears repeating. The romantic relationship that you have in your life is so absolutely critical to your growth, your potential as a person, your success. And part and parcel of that romantic relationship is the physical aspect of it. And so for better or for worse, you've got to get that right if you want to show up as the best version of yourself in your relationship and in your life. Never forget, you were made for more.